Picher, Oklahoma is a toxic ghost town located in Ottawa County in the northeast corner of Oklahoma. Picher was created when lead and zinc was discovered in the area. This led to the town and surrounding area's population to rapidly grow, but decades later would also lead to the town's demise. Picher is located in what was known as the Tri-State Mining District, which included southwest Missouri, southeast Kansas, and northeast Oklahoma. Mining in this area started back in 1848 near Joplin, Missouri. Mines would continue to open in this region in the mid to late 1800s. The first Oklahoma mine in the Tri-State District would open in 1891, and then in 1905, lead and zinc was discovered on land belonging to the Quapaw tribe, very close to where Picher would eventually spring up. The town of Picher formed in 1913 and by 1918 was officially incorporated. Picher was named after O.S. Picher, who was the owner of the Picher Lead Company. The town would continue to expand as mining activity increased, and by 1920, Picher's population would reach around 9,700 residents. The population would peak in 1926 with an estimated population of 14,252 in 1926. Other nearby towns that connected to Picher included Cardin, Douthit, Hawkerville, Zinkville in Oklahoma, as well as Treese, Kansas. The combined population for all these towns peaked at over 20,000 in the 1920s when mining jobs were plentiful. At one time, the mines by Picher produced the most lead and zinc in the country, with around 50% of the lead and zinc used by the United States in World War I being mined there. In 1927, around the time mining in the area peaked, there was a total of 248 mills which extracted lead and zinc from the ore. Then in the 1930s, companies and mills consolidated into fewer companies. From 1908 to 1950, over $1 billion of lead and zinc was produced in the Tri-State Mining District, or well over $20 billion worth with inflation adjusted for. While mining production was relatively strong most years leading up to and during World War II, after the war, mining slowed down, and this led to more problems for Picher and the surrounding towns. Every subsequent decade after 1920, which was the first census after Picher was incorporated, saw population decline in the census. Mining peaked in the mid-1920s, and no other industries could replace those jobs, partially because the ground wouldn't be stable to build on with the mines underground. So with few jobs, people began to leave the area. Mining in Picher stopped in 1967, and by 1970, the population was down to 2,363, or an over 83% decline from the peak population. Water was no longer being pumped out from the mines. As the water filled the mines, it became contaminated with lead, zinc, and cadmium. Eventually, the water leaked out and would contaminate nearby Tar Creek. The creek turned an orange color, and many would continue to swim and fish in the creek until the true danger was known. Tar Creek eventually flows into Grand Lake in Oklahoma, which is a local water source and a popular spot for recreational activities. By 1983, Picher and the surrounding towns were designated as a Superfund site by the Environmental Protection Agency. This site was a high priority for the EPA. Cleanup of the site has proven to be a colossal task, as there was once over 70 million tons of waste tailings and 36 million tons of mill sand and sludge. Even to this day, there are still several mountains of chat around the area. Chat is a name for the mining waste. Residents of the area used to ride dirt bikes, ATVs, and sled on the chat piles. Sandboxes and driveways were also filled with chat. This also contaminated much of the topsoil around the town. Today, the only approved use of the chat is for mixing it with asphalt to pave roads, and also for concrete production. In 1996, the Oklahoma Health Department conducted a study and found that 38% children tested had an elevated amount of blood lead level in Picher. Additionally, 13% of children in Quapaw and 63% in Cardin tested had an elevated amounts also. Another study by the U.S. Public Health Service's Indian Health Service found 34% of 192 Native American children tested in the area had lead levels of over 10 micrograms per deciliter, which is considered to be an elevated level. Once lead enters the bloodstream, it never leaves. Elevated lead levels can cause learning difficulties, kidney and brain damage, nervous system damage, infertility, as well as other things. Cadmium, which was another contaminant in Picher, can potentially cause lung and kidney damage, fragile bones, and cancer. Zinc exposure isn't as serious as lead or cadmium, as low levels of zinc help the body function. However, too high levels of zinc can lower levels of good cholesterol, decreased immune function, and contribute to copper deficiency. The EPA began removing 6 to 10 inches of topsoil from Picher residents' yards to hopefully reduce exposure to chat dust and contaminated water. Eventually, more would be learned about potential health risks and how dangerous it was to live there. By 2000, the population had dropped to 1,640. A U.S. Army Corps of Engineers study discovered that 86% of properties in Picher could collapse due to mines being underneath. So due to sinkholes and the continued health risks, the federal government began buying out homes in 2005. Years ago, a lawsuit was filed against a Tulsa-based appraisal firm involved in the buyouts for intentionally undervaluing appraisals. Cinnabar's service company, or at least that's how I think you say it, would have to pay out $1.3 million to 161 plaintiffs and their lawyers because of the ruling. Eventually, there would be over 270 plaintiffs. In 2008, an EF4 tornado, which had wind speeds in between 166 to 200 miles an hour, or 267 to 321 kilometers an hour, damaged a large portion of the town, killing 6 people and injuring many more. This sped up the buyout process, and a year later, on September 1st, 2009, Picher was no longer an incorporated town. For the 2010 census, only 20 residents remained. That same year, most of the town's buildings were demolished, and one website said the last person living in Picher died in 2015. To this day, cleanup of the Tar Creek Superfund continues, and several companies use the chat to create asphalt and concrete. But other than that, it is almost a complete ghost town. So this is going to wrap up the history section. For the rest of the video, we're going to be exploring some of the remaining buildings in this ghost town. And then also next week, we'll have a part 2, just exploring more buildings in Picher and Carden also. Across this church right here on the side of the road. Looks kind of cool from the outside. Let's get a little closer. So it's just a one-room church right here, and nothing's left. Still pretty cool. No. So we got more houses this way. They're basically like all around. Pretty much, I think they might use some of these buildings for like training or something. Cause there's some police cars that didn't look operational, and then there was a sign on one of the doors that said "Working Dog Keep Out." So they could be doing some sort of police training out here. Be a good guess. And they also made like really no effort to board up any of these buildings. There's probably a good 20 of them, I'd say. Nobody out here too. Yeah. There's a cat over there that just walked by. See if anything is left behind in the house here. Floor is not too great of condition. Kind of feel it moving a little bit under me. This room's pretty rough too. Old couch. About all I see in here. Oh, that floor is not stable. This was like the living room over here. So over there in the distance, you can kind of see, can't really see too well, but that's one of the chat piles. And there's a lot of these. They piled up all the byproducts from mining the zinc and lead, and there's just these huge hills now that aren't naturally here.
So we drove around a little further, and there's quite a bit of buildings still left here. Here's just a group of buildings. It's probably probably close to 7 or 8 buildings here. They're all pretty collapsed and dangerous, so we're probably not going to go inside of them. But just wanted to show you guys.
We can like kind of walk in here, stick it through the window. All the roofs collapsing in there. Nobody's living there for a long time.
These houses are pretty small too. Especially the ones with the other one.
Yeah.
The other part, they were tiny. They were probably a little bit bigger than a hotel room. Quite a bit back here.
Looks like some kind of shed or a barn, possibly. Another collapsed building over there. Alright, so over this way we have a little another cluster of buildings, maybe 3 or 4 this way. Looks like an old house right here. Peek inside, probably won't walk around. A lot of these buildings are small and there's not a ton in there. It's kind of rough looking. Yeah, so this one right here still has a few items left behind. There's a couch. Looks like, I don't know if I'm gonna, I don't really want to fall through the floor, but we'll see. We'll just walk a little bit in here. Might be some, oh wow, there's a lot of looks like a lot of clothes over there. It looks pretty destroyed and just decaying in here. Yeah, the weather's getting in and it's in pretty rough shape. I'm sure the roof will fall in before too long. Carpet's so nasty. That's where the room ends right there. Thank you all for watching to the end of this video. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. And we'll also be coming out with part 2 to this video for next week. We'll have more buildings and places to explore, and we can't wait to show you all what we found.